Hi, my name is Francesca, and this is Critical Babe Theory, and this is my friend. Are you like a parishioner?
Yes.
Are you a fellow parishioner?
A fellow parishioner.
Dhananjay Jagannathan, also, other than just a parishioner. Can you imagine being like a professional parishioner?
I think that sounds great. I look forward to that phase of my life.
Yeah, totally. Retirement.
Yeah.
AKA retirement.
Yeah.
But also a professor of philosophy focusing. You focus in Aristotle. Does that mean your teaching focuses in Aristotle?
I teach ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, ethics, and political philosophy, and also philosophy and literature sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. And you write copious numbers of essays. You are an essayist.
Yes.
As we have gone over before. So, welcome. Your
Thank
day
you.
is going. We've been talking about how our day is going. It's a little May I? It's a little sleepy.
It's a little sleepy.
Yeah.
It's Christmas Eve.
It is Christmas Eve. This will not be released, although it's sort of fitting that we're taping it on
Yeah.
Christmas Eve, but it will not be released until a little bit after the New Year, given me, I guess.
Enjoy 2026, suckers.
May many blessings rain down upon you. I remember seeing a stupid meme. Maybe it's not stupid. I guess I just assume any meme is stupid, which is perhaps problematic. Memes perhaps ought to be taken seriously as the modus operandi of our time.
Yeah. I mean, I love a good meme.
Right?
I was making a meme earlier.
Oh,
Well, I was trying to find
literally.
a meme.
You were trying to make a
find
meme.
a meme that I think I saw a few years ago, and then I couldn't find it, and I thought about recreating it, and then instead I prepared for this podcast.
Yeah, that's great. I often think, when I think about, a couple things make me think about infinity. Memes, trash, and like interior design, rooms. And
Okay, the first two I can see where you're going. How does interior design what?
Because so I love, there's a magazine called The World of Interiors, a British, it's under Condé Nast, as if that matters. I'm like doing free advertising for Condé Nast, who honestly desperately needs it. But they just have all these, and the thing that was great about them.
Was that your way of getting invited to the Vanity Fair party?
The Vanity Fair party is unfortunately totally irrelevant at this point.
Oh.
I know, isn't that crazy?
I've been living in New York for 8 years. I'm just learning these kinds of things.
I know. Everything that once was important passeth away. You know what I mean?
Like the world of interior design.
Well, the stature. They got this new, I probably shouldn't, really one of my greatest ambitions in life is to be in the world of interiors. So me now talking smack about the editor is probably one of the most self-defeating things I could do. You just shook your head really small to me to be like, don't do it.
It depends on what you want,
Basically,
Francesca.
I know. I just have to speak truth to, I wouldn't call it power anymore since the publishing industry.
Truth to irrelevancy?
Yes, exactly.
I think they're getting a lot of truth in the form of subscription numbers
I
every
know,
month.
right? They really don't need my extra
Okay,
truth. But they
tell me.
hired this very dapper dandy gentleman named Hamish Bowles, if the name gives it, yes, who frequently wears bow ties. And I have nothing against him. What I have against him about his bow ties, what I have against him is that he's not involved in interiors. He used to be the head of, I believe, Vogue, British Vogue. So he's just not.
He comes from the clothing world.
Yeah, it's just
fashion.
not, it's just wrong. And he's like, now he puts recipes in it. Like there's a recipe and now whatever. I don't need to, this is
So
like
they're turning it into good housekeeping.
Sort of, but like
best housekeeping.
It's tragic. But this is like the most bourgeois thing I could possibly be talking about right now. But anyway, why am I even talking about that? Oh, because they used to, what was amazing about them is in this spread, they would have, pictures, a photo shoot in an 18th century chateau, wherever your chateau is. But they would also have like an unelectrified hut in the woods in Britain with no plumbing, where everything was made of sticks. And so it really did this beautiful thing of high-low, and you get to see all of these rooms, from like the most grandiose to the most humble, and the beauty of all of them. And I often wish I could see every room in the world. Alas, I cannot. And then I'm like, I know there are not an infinite number of rooms in the world, but for all conceptual intents and purposes, there basically are.
In my father's house.
There
are many rooms. I've often thought if I were the son of a billionaire or something, I would just go around saying that. In my father's house, there are many rooms.
And basically nobody would get your joke except a very small subset of like maybe fundamentalist Christians and...
Well, there's a famous mathematical problem about an infinity of rooms called Hilbert's Hotel.
Oh, I love this.
So it's a way of thinking about how infinite magnitudes work differently from finite ones. Because
I realized like you're really smart and you're also an academic. And so my goal today, because I was reading your work earlier today and I was like in kind of like my baby brain where I like can't read academic writing as a result of bearing children, which I think we discussed before. So anyway, I want to keep things really nuts and bolts for my brain today. So go back. An infinite what?
So you can think about it like adding a drop to the ocean.
Yeah.
Right? The ocean still gets bigger even though it's not perceptible.
Yes.
But the ocean is still finite. So the ocean's magnitude does increase. And there's this funny thing where if you add a finite amount to something infinite, its magnitude doesn't change.
Whoa, bro.
So and the best way to think about it is, what I like about Hilbert's Hotel is that it is kind of an intuitive idea. It's not mathematically precise or formal. So you imagine a hotel owned by David Hilbert, this mathematician.
Fab.
And there's an infinite number of rooms. And so you can count the rooms. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then you have to go up to the second floor to get to room 11 and so on. And it's just got, it's infinitely tall. So there's as many rooms as you want. And the proprietor, David Hilbert, puts up the no vacancy sign because he says there's someone in every room. That's conceptually possible, right?
Yeah.
There's an infinite number of people and they're in each of the rooms in Hilbert's Hotel. And someone comes to the door and sees the no vacancy sign and says, hey, could you make some space for me? I really need to stay here tonight. And he's like, no problem. And he tells everyone that for the next night, they're just going to move from the room that they're in to the next room. So the person in room 1 goes to room 2, the person in room 2 goes to room 3, and so on. And then room 1 is now vacant, and the guest...
Ad infinitum, literally.
Yes, and the guest can simply... But no, it's important that although it's an infinite number of people and an infinite number of rooms, they're performing a finite action. That whole group of people, that infinite group of people, is all they're doing is moving to the next room.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's space.
What do you take from... Because that just makes me feel like I smoked a joint. So what do you take from that?
What I take from that is that our ordinary notions of bigness and smallness don't make sense when it comes to infinity, but that we can think about the difference between infinite tasks and finite tasks, and those are different from thinking about infinite magnitudes and finite magnitudes.
So
the task is move to the room next to you, and so every person just does that one discrete action, and all of a sudden there's room.
Question is God a finite task or an infinite task?
So I think the way that this maps on to the world of experience rather than just the world of numbers is that the world is a finite thing. Mm-hmm. Creation is finite.
Physical creation.
Physical creation is finite,
okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so in relation to God, of course, it is like the drop going into the ocean or the one guy arriving at the hotel with infinite rooms. It's infinitely smaller, you might say, than God is. Mm-hmm. But when God acts in creation in various ways, that power, that magnitude can be present everywhere, like in the act of creation itself. And we can view that act from two perspectives. Mm-hmm. We can see it in the result, and the result is something finite.
Yeah.
Or we can see it in the origin or the source, and we can regard that as infinite, that nothing gets used up, right? When a human being makes something, as it were, they use something of themselves, even if it's just time, mm-hmm. To make it. And the result is something finite. We are something finite. And so that's a kind of creation where we're dealing with the same order of things on both sides, the creator and the created.
Whose hotel is it again?
Hilbert.
Okay, so in Hilbert's hotel, God is the hotel. Hilbert is Jesus, and we wanting a room are the pilgrims in need of salvation.
I'm gonna have to think about that.
I don't know.
But I kind of I like that.
I think that makes sense. Here's the thing:
that's kind of awesome, actually. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I mean,
but is God the hotel, or is he the owner, as opposed to the manager? No, we're gonna get into adoptionism or some kind of heresy quickly.
I think God is the body, right? I mean, like God, because I always think about this phrase, like the kingdom of God is at hand, and the way. Did we talk about this?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. You know my brain. Fried.
But we're also in the middle of like 10 conversations, which is great.
Which is really hard to keep track of. I have to work on personal consistency. Maybe not my strongest suit. So I love this idea. The kingdom of God is at hand. And the way that I have thought about that is not, as I believe we were hearing about recently, right? Not this idea that like the judgment and revelation will come and the next coming of Christ is going to happen like, oh, shoot, in the next 2 weeks to 10
Better
years.
get your affairs in order.
Yeah,
quickly.
like, because you're going to be, what's it called when you get vanished? Up and
raptured?
Like you're going to get raptured any momentito. So you got to get on it. That's not my understanding of that. It's like this idea of like, literally the kingdom of God is at hand. And if you're listening, I'm touching the table with my hand, right? That like actually the kingdom of God is right where my hand is. Like the opportunity to live in the kingdom of God is right here and now.
That's right.
And it's simply a matter of perspective.
And that's what we're going to be thinking about tonight at church, where we are fellow parishioners.
Yeah, well,
the incarnation. God acting in time and coming into being in physical being.
In God acting in infinite time, coming into finite physical being.
I don't think of it as in infinite time, but rather out of eternity, maybe is the right way to put it.
Bro.
Because from God's perspective, it's not as if there is a time that is experienced discursively until the second person of the Trinity enters into the world. Yeah. And then God shares in our finite
But why
reality.
did God want to do that?
Well, I think this is part of the mystery.
Yeah. That's a capital M mystery right there.
But it's because we need help.
I need help.
And all the warnings from the prophets and the various kinds of moral education that were provided, including, I think, most fundamentally in our possession of a faculty of conscience, or our ability to reason about what's good and what's bad.
Faculty of conscience, like having the faculty, literally having the ability to be conscious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, having being created with moral awareness. I'll put it that way.
Great. Okay.
So because we have this kind of moral awareness, or the sense of ethical duty, however you want to talk about it, the sense that we owe things to other people, that we are bound together with them, that we are...
We're not in some Hobbesian state of nature
correct.
Where we are all fighting to the death, ruled only by...
the desire for self-interest.
Yeah, and survival of the fittest.
Right. So because that's not the human lot, we are endowed with a lot of the capacities that we need to live correctly, but we are not endowed with the capacities by nature to live the kind of life that would bring us to salvation. And that's precisely because of this gap between human finite existence and God's infinite magnitude, that in order to, as it were, rise up to a task that is in some sense above us, we need various kinds of help. And the incarnation, it kind of fits into that category. Again, as I said last time, my theology is very amateur.
You know what? We love amateurism here.
That's how I understand it. And what's nice about this is that this is an everyday experience, right? The sense of not being able to follow through on your resolutions, the sense of vulnerability to other people, and the sense that you might fail them in various ways, we just are going to fail each other. Like to love
It's
someone
inevitable.
is to participate in that kind of mutual failure, and also the mutual aspiration to overcome it. That's what friendship is fundamentally, and that is just, there are lots of ways of explaining that, and the kind of secular materialist ways of explaining that is that to some extent we're kidding ourselves when we think that that there are really these higher aspirations. That's all the creation of human culture. Maybe it's part of a system that's designed to control us in various ways. For me, I think the helplessness of a baby, the vulnerability that we feel when we come into the world and when we go out of the world, and all of the work that we do in between to keep that vulnerability at bay, that, to me, is the source of this everyday experience of needing one another and needing help.
So here is a tie-in that you all may not expect, which is that I have often pondered, how do I get into this? I was recently speaking with a friend of mine let's take it out of her. So I gave birth at home, unmedicated, the second child, the first one I attempted, right? And there's these very conflicting ways of conceiving of, not literally conceiving, of conceptualizing human childbirth, right? There's the kind of more medicalized way, which is like, this is very dangerous, you could die.
Yeah.
And then there's this other way, the kind of more hippied out, crunchy, kind of getting to Maha version, which is like, this is a natural process, your body knows what to do, it need not be monitored and enforced by institutions like hospitals.
And it will be worse for both mother and baby if it is, importantly.
Exactly. Spiritually worse, physically worse, medically worse.
Yeah.
So without diving into that, because I would love to do an upcoming episode on, there's some controversy in the free birthing world. Anyway, I won't get too into that. I, for a long time, sort of had a hard time circling the square. No. Is
Squaring
that what you do?
circle?
Squaring the circle? That's not a phrase.
Each one of them is impossible in its own way.
Okay, great. So where I was like, how could it be that animals, not us, not human beings, but other mammals, are giving birth all the time, and it's like pretty chill and stuff. And what I found through my study, which I don't think this is that radical, is that what allowed us to kind of move forward in evolution is that in selection of, I was going to say class selection, which is really depressing. In selection for like characteristics in species, the women who gave birth, because we had these giant brains, right?
All the energy of like a lot of the gestational energy is just going to
the brain.
To the brain.
Is just to the brain.
Yeah.
And like
that's
our
why
brains,
babies look like aliens.
Crazy. And the brains got so big with human beings because of tools and all the stuff we could do that actually it's more beneficial to give birth to that baby prematurely.
Yeah.
Because the head, if gone to like a full gestation where the baby was less helpless, let's just say in a very rough analogy as to a horse, which can, the foal, is that what they're called?
The foal can like skip around
upon birth, right? That actually what natural selection favored was women who gave birth earlier in gestation because they could get the head out from the Oz before they died with a big-headed baby.
But the big head is still the basic problem.
The big head is the basic problem.
The pelvis is the size of,
The pelvis just is, and the head is the variable. But this makes me wonder if this is what classes human beings as different than animals.
It's among the things that makes us different is that we are so vulnerable.
Yes.
And it's not just the selection for intelligence, but I think also our profoundly social nature, our cooperative nature, right? One of the things that's wrong about the state of nature narrative that we could exist independently, and
but I guess what I want to highlight, which before we get to new smart thoughts I have to really think hard about, is like the power that we have been able to organize as social animals to create this world is only allowed because of the vulnerability created in the baby. That there's this inextricable relationship between vulnerability and power.
That's right.
That I think we forget.
That's right. And I think that if there were a natural form for the human being, you would have to think about it in terms of a small social unit that's cooperating and centrally cooperating around raising young from this incredibly vulnerable state to a state where they are able to, be mature enough to contribute to the group and so on, and eventually replace the adult members. And so a lot of energy has to be expended on that kind of care because we spend so much of our early lives so vulnerable. And this also changes the forms of cooperation in these small bands. It's actually
tribal, if we may.
Yeah, you need help from maybe more than just the parents to organize childcare and child rearing. And if you look at different traditional societies or cultures in different places, you'll see that there are lots of different ways of organizing it, but that there's a kind of fundamental theme that the nuclear family is kind of a crazy idea.
It's too small.
That's too small to do it manageably. And we do it because we have these very large, social units that organize things like schools that handle, effectively, which are just like, massive childcare operations. And again, we're still expending all of this energy on it. It's just more mechanized in our post-industrial civilization. But the natural condition of human existence is to be oriented towards this kind of care for the vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And that's something about us that is easy to forget if you are not engaged in the business of actually caring for either children or the elderly or the sick, which many of us aren't. Like, our societies are organized in such a way that most of us aren't doing that.
Well,
you, however,
I am very
and this
much.
is why this is relevant.
Which I think brings us to, for those who are watching, are you there? This is the book that we are discussing. It's by Phil Christman. Good name given the topic. It's called Why Christians Should Be Leftists, which I think makes a lot of sense given what we're talking about, right? Where the vulnerability is what allows us the power, but the vulnerability is what increases our need, right? And why we need some sort of help, as you were saying earlier, to work our way towards salvation, or even, self-governance together in some kind of earthly paradise.
Yeah, and there are lots of arguments from justice, conceived of in a totally secular vein, that say we should have a lot more redistribution of material resources, because if we really care about the individual flourishing of each person, then we would be concerned to ensure that each person has enough to live a decent life, and that systems where power and money and resources are concentrated in the hands of a few are going to be ones where there's lots of people who are going to be left out. And you can't just leave it to the market, and maybe you can't even just leave it to a state that supervises people, exchanging their labor for wages in the way that free market societies typically do. What you need is a state apparatus to provide for people. There's a whole set of arguments that are just focused on considerations of justice. But there's a different kind of solidarity that focuses on vulnerability. Yeah. And that's the kind of root of argument that Christman takes in the book. And I think that, again, there's a totally secular traditions of this as well. But I think if you think that there's a special obligation on each person, especially each Christian, to care for the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the sick, then leftism looks a whole lot more plausible. If you think that that's one of the central imperatives that we have in this life, and that that's because we were commanded to do that, that's a different kind of argument, but it fits and augments in certain ways the underlying arguments from justice about material redistribution and, importantly, the redistribution of power that leftists hold.
Well, it's sort of the difference between a should and an ought.
I'm using those.
I'm saying, like, from the justice, I would venture that, justice, the kind of secular version of justice, comes from a should. Like, we should take care. Maybe I'm teasing out a difference in meaning between those words that doesn't really exist. But, there's some kind of call in the ought that, one has an obligation.
Yeah.
As opposed to just a prerogative.
Right. Yeah, I think there are different. What you're picking up on is that there are different kinds of shoulds. I mean, people should make art. No one is obliged to make art. But
See, I would disagree. I think if God tells you to make
no. But let's suppose, okay. Maybe you can fit this into be fruitful and multiply. I don't know. But let's say that there's no particular obligation to make art. It's still good to make art. And there are lots of things that it's good to do that we're not obliged to do because of some particular person's need of it. But then there are things like taking care of the most vulnerable members of society, where those people's needs do oblige us. And they might oblige us to take particular actions or to change society so that there are systems that provide for these people. But what the obligation is coming from the person and their needs, the fact that they have a life that has dignity and ought to embody that dignity, that they have this dignity and their life ought to embody that dignity. That's probably the right way to put it. That's a very powerful and important idea, but I think it's actually hard to give that the due emphasis unless you also think that there's a kind of special obligation to do it.
Yes.
Right? That we're in some sense called to do it. And that's where I think actually the argument that Christians should be leftists is kind of stronger than the merely justice-focused or material arguments. But that's it. That's not the way that the book is framed. The book is framed very differently.
Let's talk about how the book is framed. I have to say, just off the bat, it was a little woke for me in its style, in its prose styling, and its rhetorical mechanisms. So I'm just going to put that out there. Like, there is the kind of like a woke house style that I think is a bit tiresome. So
I think it's well written within that broader family of rhetorical styles. And I mean, I think this is because I know Phil, and
you do?
There's a kind of pleasurable experience of reading a book written by someone where they kind of read it to you in their head.
He just sounds hella nerdy.
He is super nerdy, and
okay.
But this really endears me to him.
I see.
But I think
I like my thought leaders a little sexier.
This is not thought leadership. I think
Got it.
This is it's more in-house than I was expecting.
It is in-house.
It's really. I mean, he doesn't reveal this until the last couple chapters of the book, but it's really addressed to ex-evangelical, formerly evangelical, or maybe still loosely affiliated with evangelical Christianity people, especially women.
Yeah, Christian moms is what he wants
Christian
to go
moms
after.
who are engaged in the business of caring for people, and who are confronted every day with the kinds of vulnerabilities that we've been talking about, and who see in politics no option that really speaks to that.
But here's the thing: if his goal, I'm going to hold up the book again for those who are watching. And if you're listening, it's not an attractive cover. Nothing about it's attractive. The font, I don't know, what is that word? Lithograph. My point is, if he's trying to reach out to Christian moms, he better go like the Jenny Kane aesthetic. I don't know if you even know what that is. That's what? God bless. Thank God. It's like Northern California banal. It's like the most non-threatening aesthetic.
Yeah.
Very Instagram, very like, ooh, it's fall. I'm cozy. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just would say that if that's his goal, this is not the method I would use.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think that if there's someone who's kind of looking for an alternative in their political orientation, who is horrified by Trumpism and by what the Republican Party has become, but who's primarily motivated by concern for the vulnerable, and that's kind of the target audience, the person who's been softened up for this message. That might actually be a pretty small audience.
Very small.
Because one of the things that he argues for is that, like, you shouldn't fall in love with the Democratic Party, which is just as interested in securing the interests of the powerful as the Republican Party. But you're going to have to make if you're on the left, you're going to have to make common cause with Democrats a bunch.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are that many people who, have this kind of background, have this sort of experience.
Who want to become dedicated socialists.
Who want to become dedicated socialists. But I think there's the explicit audience, and then there's, I think, a broader audience. And the broader audience is people who are coming from mainline Protestantism, where the Episcopal Church, where we are members. Are you a member?
You mean do I have to sign up somewhere?
I think you do have to.
I was married in the church. Does that count? You're probably a member if you had a whole.
I think you have to be. I think your baptism has to be recorded.
Oh yeah, my baptism's recorded.
In the Episcopal Church, it has to.
Well, I mean, it was at St. John the Divine. I hope they wrote it down.
Nice. Okay, so you are so much more a member than. Oh no, we're equally members. But my point is,
it's not a competition.
No. But it's just I'm always very impressed by the cathedral. And it's such a beautiful building.
It is gorgeous, but I'll tell you, the sermons are dry.
Yeah. So from mainline Protestantism and. Phil is, I think, a member of a mainline church as well. There's a lot of milquetoast liberalism, where there's no actual way of fitting together your politics, where you go to the polls and you vote for Democrats, and what your spiritual life might be telling you.
And agreeing specifically what he frames it around is the Sermon on the Mount,
right?
We cannot follow the admonitions of the Sermon on the Mount and then vote down the Democratic Party line.
Right. And or see that as anything other than a compromise. Mm-hmm. And, he does advocate for voting.
But he did in a way where he kind of crossed purposes himself. He did vote for our war criminal Kamala in the last election. Fab.
But I voted on purely ethnic grounds because she was the first Tamil candidate for higher office, and I'm
as ethnic. In the Tamil Tigers.
Yeah, those are in Sri Lanka. I believe Kamala Harris's heritage, like mine, is Tamil from Tamil Nadu.
But are they related?
India. Yeah.
Okay.
Same ethnic group. Two countries.
Aren't they a really fab revolutionary group?
No, they're
a terrible revolutionary.
Involved in a lot of butchery. The Sri Lankan Civil War is very sad.
Okay,
and there's a lot of horrible behavior on both sides. To be clear.
Okay.
But I do not.
But maybe they had good PR.
I am not here endorsing the Tamil Tigers.
Okay, great.
I am, however, telling you that I was probably unduly swayed by the fact that Kamala.
So are you a single issue voter?
Yeah, Tamils only, which is why if that would have led me to vote for, I think Vivek Ramaswamy is.
Oh, Nightmaresville.
Yeah. So okay, I take it back. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. Ethnic interests are not high on my list.
I mean, she's hot for sure.
Yes, but yes, equally interested in
killing children in Gaza.
Correct, but. The world is a lot worse right now, and especially USAID being dismantled by Elon Musk is responsible for some of the most horrific suffering that is happening that was completely preventable. That children are dying in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere of malaria and AIDS and all the rest because they don't have access to medication, and that is because Donald Trump won the election and Kamala Harris didn't. So obviously complicity is just part of political life. Yeah. We're interwoven. That's what complicity means. We're interwoven. And so we're complicit with the foreign policy misadventures of the United States, with various genocides it and its allies perpetrate. But I think the way that I think about politics is voting. Politics really comes through in Phil's book. Politics is the everyday. It's about what you do in your community. It's about going to your soup kitchen and volunteering there.
Politics is how we live together, I believe.
How we live together, yes. A beautiful Aristotelian thought that I wholeheartedly endorse. Voting is about harm reduction. And I know that people talk about it as you vote for the lesser of two evils. And I don't like that framing because it makes it very easy to let yourself off the hook and say, and it also tells you always to vote for one of the two major parties, which may not always be the reasonable thing to do, depending on what kind of an election is, what kind of context you're in. You know, there are Democrats like Chuck Schumer, and there are Democrats like Zohran Mamdani, right? They're both members of the Democratic Party.
I guess what I felt like is that Phil kind of wanted to have his cake and eat it too. Like, he specifically in the book goes into how he's not a social democrat. He doesn't believe in like social democracy.
Yeah, social democracy is kind of a
milk toast. He thinks it's like a halfway.
But he thinks that there are insights to be gotten from social democracy, but that too often it ends up, you know, what is social democracy? Social democracy is within a basically free market framework. You have, you know, government-sponsored programs that take care of the basic needs of people. So you might have Medicare for all and robust Social Security. Maybe you have universal basic income. You have free childcare. This is the dream of the people on the left edge of the Democratic Party, right? Bernie Sanders, Zohran Mamdani. This is the kind of thing that they want to move us toward, that we are pretty far away from right now.
And he's saying it's not nearly enough.
It's not nearly enough, but there are insights to be gotten from that. And he thinks there are insights to be gotten from other, we might say, more authentic strains of the left. And
not in this country, I would
not
assume.
In this country, no. And there's a healthily internationalist focus that
on Cuba. Another person coming into my living room and telling me how amazing it is to be in Cuba.
No, but I think the argument is really not that, you know, we should emulate any existing systems out there, but we need to think creatively about what the possibilities are.
But
there's an imaginative dimension here.
Totally, I completely agree with that. Here's my quibble with him. He goes on this long, I won't call it a tirade because it's a little too demure for that, polemic about how you can never get into unjustify means kind of thinking, right? That we must maintain our morals through this whole process. But what he also is calling for is socialism, where in many ways private property would be abolished, like huge societal changes, which I have a hard time squaring.
There wouldn't be any hedge fund managers in the world that Phil wants, but you will still have your house and your stuff in it. So I actually don't think it's that radical. I think what I found refreshing about the book is that he distinguishes between the kind of property ownership that where when one person owns something, they're also in a position of power over others and able to exploit them in various ways. Ownership of the means of production.
Oh, and he was saying like getting rid of shareholders, right? All of this stuff.
Yeah, but we would still have, I think, the description of the book is, you know, he's happy with the idea that there would still be private companies. There would just be more distributed ownership. So you wouldn't have, you know, Elon Musk owning whatever portion of his companies he does, and that's what enables him not only to be so fabulously wealthy, but also to use those companies in various ways to advance his political agenda.
Sure. Okay. To me, to go from A to B,
yeah,
from where we are now to there, I understand that it's maybe that's a big lift. That's a big lift. Let's just say
it will require a cataclysm of some kind.
A cataclysm, which is often marked by violence. Most cataclysms, and it's interesting because he is so against any kind of ends justify means thinking. But what I was unless I missed it, he fails to mention Matthew. What is it? No, here it is. I think it's Matthew 34. No, Matthew 10:34. Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword.
But a sword, yes.
And I'll just read a little more for I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's foes shall be they of his own household.
I think this is of a piece with the kingdom of God language and the casting down of earthly kings message in the gospel. And the way that I think of this, and I think this is the way that the peace churches also think of passages like this, is that our attachment to material things,
even the material thing of one's own mother and father.
Well, our earthly attachments, when those are sundered, that we experience as violence. And it's violence in the sense of being contrary to our will. That's what violence means.
Wait, according to whom?
Well, the word violence, just in its etymology, means something that's contrary to our will. And so I think you can understand the attachment to earthly things as being what is, and this is why this is how I associate the sword language with precisely how our social relations will have to be reordered. That to the extent that we remain attached to those earthly things, whether that's private property, whether it's other forms of idolatry, like, worshiping the family can be a form of idolatry. I think it's a very powerful form of idolatry in American society.
Give me an example.
Well, thinking that you're...
Like the Kardashians?
No, like you need to... your goal in life should be to provide for your family at the expense of others, is a kind of very deep ethical commitment of bourgeois American life.
I know, but at this point, it's a little bit much. People can barely provide for their own.
No, I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who could very easily provide a great deal for others, take themselves to be justified because there's a kind of nobility in preserving something for your family. And I'm not saying it has to go to the excesses of, one of these billionaires like Larry Ellison handing over something to his son, or the Trump family organization or what have you. I think, I believe in a 100% estate tax. Mm-hmm. So
can you explain what that would be to
I think you shouldn't be able to transfer property to future generations. I think what you should be able to do is enable them to engage in consumption activities. So you have a very generous gift tax exemption. So people one generation can give money to another to help them with things in the here and now. But when you die, your stuff doesn't go to the next generation, because I think that's, especially if you look at this country, the wealth gap between Black Americans and white Americans is vast. And that is largely a product of the fact that, Black Americans who are descendants of former slaves and enslaved people, they were not, that labor did not end up in the form of property that could then be transferred from generation to generation.
Sure. But let me query you just a thought experiment.
Sure.
Which is, let's say, one is a recent immigrant to this country who came from nothing, the generation before was able to scrabble together a little bit of sustenance. The next generation made that sustenance grow.
Yeah.
And then perhaps for your children, you are able to buy a house.
Yeah.
An unthinkable luxury.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And for me, I guess the idea of home is very strong. Like there is something to me, maybe because my mother died when I was relatively young and I was so attached to my home, and that home is gone and will never be returned, and I have this very strong attachment to passing on to my children a home, because a home is not just the private property, not just the accumulation of capital, but almost an ontological state of comfort and safety, which is in itself, I see, a false idol.
It is a false idol, and I'm willing to accept this. Like if my parents leave to me and my sister a house, I will sell that house and give that money away. Like
you are. Oh wow. That's how deep your commitment goes.
It's a practical commitment, yeah. I think.
But if you had children, would you have this commitment?
My parents have helped me enormously, including financially, in so many ways. Primarily because of the kind of upbringing I had, and the emphasis on education, and the kind of social opportunities that I was afforded by class membership in the class of highly educated people, and. We didn't have much when we emigrated to the U.S., but, my father had a high-paying professional job, and I grew up in a comfortable way. All of those advantages to me feel like they are more than enough. It set me up to have a certain kind of middle-class life myself, and a professional class life. Why would I want more than that? Well, I can imagine wanting.
Have you tasted the fruit of more? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You might just not know yet.
I don't want to find out.
You would like to stay in the
But
garden.
I understand the ontological point. I mean, I remember from my childhood this very powerful experience of visiting I think it's my great-grandfather's house. He was no longer alive and wasn't alive then, as a child, and kind of...
Where was this house?
In India.
And what was this house like?
It was like a big stone house in the middle of a bunch of rice paddies.
To die for. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I have these kind of happy memories of a short visit to it. And there's that sense of like, here is where our family comes back. Right.
Yeah.
And we come together. And I think we associate those experiences of home with particular places. Maybe it's just because I grew up in a much more itinerant way where, you know, my parents have moved several times in my adulthood, that I don't have any such attachment to a place. But of course it makes sense to me. I think in a world with a lot less material scarcity, we would have...
But you might have attachment to other things like your virtue.
Well, that would be fun. It would be great if I had some to be attached to.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we all have, I guess, I hear what you are saying.
Yeah.
But I also felt within this book, just like, you know, I have an attachment to this false idol of home, of hearth. You might have. I wouldn't dare to presume what false idols you might preserve in your life. But what I think Phil Christman failed to understand is that, like, once people have tasted the fruit of comfort...
Yeah.
It is challenging to remove it from their mouths.
So I think this is where, you know, there is a certain kind of leftist who is super into like the degrowth agenda, and we need to like reduce consumption and reduce material standards, and people are going to have to adjust to like more of a lifestyle like people have in Cuba or what have you, so that we can have a fair and a just society. And I think that's it's not going to happen in America, and so it's not a worthwhile political goal to pursue in the short term or the medium term. And maybe if there is some kind of enormous societal collapse, like that's what we're just going to be faced with. That's going to be the version of the cataclysm that comes upon us, maybe because of climate change or something else, some kind of political crisis, civil war, let's say. But I think if you're thinking about a practical politics, there's a lot to pursue that doesn't presuppose that kind of reduction in living standards and consumption. We can have fair distribution, and in particular, we can limit the kinds of private property accumulation, especially the ownership of things like land. Phil mentioned several times in the book intellectual property, which I think is super interesting, right? So if you think about the pandemic...
I don't really want my intellectual property just to be run away with
no,
at any point.
But let's think about like Pfizer and its patent on the vaccine.
Sure. Totally,
right?
but why does Pfizer not get their patent, but I get my play? Do you know what I mean?
Because there was this massive government investment in getting Operation Warp Speed off the ground, and all of the indirect subsidies that we provide to private property owners, like the fact that we don't tax land, for instance, in this country, is infuriating to me because, you know.
Wait, how is that different than a property tax?
Well, you know, property tax might be on like your house, but there's also just, you know, there's just the ownership of land, which is taxed either not at all or at very low rates. But if you're thinking like, you know, why can't we have a more just and a more productive society? A big part of it is that it's in the interests of private property owners to hold on to what they have in such a way that it's not actually free for the productive use of others. And so it's that Scrooge-like miserly instinct. And we think of it as kind of natural to capitalism that there should be these, like, you know, there's different models for who the hero of capitalism is. And a lot of times in the US we hear about the small business owner. And most of the time what we're really talking about is the core constituency of the Republican Party, which is the used car salesman who owns his dealership. And I think we should be thinking about the bodega owner.
I didn't know that the used car salesman was the primary constituency of the Republican Party.
It is a huge part of how the Republican Party is organized. And I mean, it's being a little reductive to reduce it to this one kind of person. But this sort of person who...
is a pariah?
Well, no, has a kind of significant power often in the local communities, might be involved in politics in certain ways. has a small set of employees, is very concerned about things
Isn't
like.
it about the pastor? Wouldn't it be more like the pastor of a super church?
No. I don't think so. I think this is a funny thing that, the modern Republican Party and evangelical Christianity have drifted apart in such a way that I think Phil does have a target audience for this reason. But at any rate, the hero of capitalism is not Andrew Carnegie or
Elon Musk.
Or Elon Musk, not the magnate, the person who has accumulated this kind of vast empire of wealth, in part because they have no interest in for one, the common good, because they get so wealthy that they can kind of set up a kind of independent life for themselves.
Sure.
Right? Elon wants to go to Mars. I say, go with God.
Go,
right?
Babe, just go.
Have your Martian empire over there. That would be fine. But this fantasy of total independence, I think, comes with this kind of extreme wealth. But there's also kind of this hoarding instinct, right? Once you have this much, wanting to keep it growing and keep it away from others, including keeping it away from other people who might make productive use of it. And so I think they end up actually being, in a way, villains of capitalism, right? If capitalism is about how the free market enables, the exchange of labor on the free market for wages, and then the incentives that the capital owner has to invest in their firm, when you get to these incredibly rich people, I think some of that, you end up with the wrong motivations. And, if we want to have a kind of vibrant, productive society, I can imagine a version of it. Maybe this is just because I'm instinctively more of a social democrat, that involves a lot of free enterprise, but it involves people actually making stuff and actually doing things of value. And what we have now...
Fewer but more beautiful things?
Yeah, like we would not have cryptocurrency.
I know.
We would not have online gambling.
Don't even get me on that.
I would love to.
I just think... What was somebody saying? Oh, I saw this online that was like, astrology is to women what crypto is to men.
And it's all bad.
I would never publicly say that astrology is bad, purely from my own self-interest, although I have heard arguments that it is basically devil worshipping.
I mean, St. Augustine makes a pretty powerful case. But
tell me what he says.
Well, I think there's different versions of astrology. One version of it, though, I think this is maybe the crypto version, is that I can get control over my life by, in some way, harnessing these forces. And maybe the forces are like the blockchain, or maybe it's like the movement of the planets. And that is an attempt to put yourself in the place of God.
But isn't it just a petition to God, except here the God is just a planet? Is it really that different? Can we pray to the blockchain? So that I cannot speak to, but I do think you could, and many have, prayed to the moon.
Yeah, sure.
I guess I would say, to me, the relationship is pretty similar. And what's interesting about the rise of astrology in the last, let's say, like 7 years, is that it definitely has like an ethical component to it that it actually didn't, in my experience as somebody who's from the Bay Area and was involved in esoteric activities for a long time. It didn't used to have the kind of ethical framework that it does today. And so it is what do you do when an exaltation? Is that what you do? No. Something
an
exorcism? Like that. No, it is extolling in others.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I was going back to the devil worship.
Yeah. Well, and I have had an exorcism before. So, but that is very Christian.
Yeah. No, sorry. You were saying about astrology.
But that astrology, it seems to have it has a moral framework and universe that it calls its believers to live up to.
Yeah.
Now,
I think that's
anyway,
right.
Just to take it back to to Scrooge, my children were watching The Muppets Christmas Carol this morning.
One of the finest adaptations.
Yeah, truly. I mean, I forgot that had Michael Caine in it, and I was just like, to be in the hands of a great actor is just, there's no pleasure like it. But so It's so interesting because you were saying like the heroes of capitalism. I guess I would say that in the internet, Elon Musk, until he got really embarrassing with his ketamine use and was like an active drug addict, he was the hero of capitalism to many men, at least on the internet. And but it's so interesting because the dichotomy between what we say we extol in our society, which is like success, money, fame, all this stuff, and then you like all the children's programming for Christmas, which demonstrates like the Grinch, Ebenezer Scrooge, like it's just beating home that selfishness and avarice and greed and all these things will like damn you eternally. It's amazing that we as a society are be able to maintain those things basically at the same level.
But one of them is in the land of fantasy and the other is in the land of like people's actual aspirations.
But what do people believe in more? They believe in fantasy. Do you know what I mean? We believe in these stories we were told.
It's two competing. You're right. It's two competing fantasies, and maybe that is kind of peculiar. But maybe it's a fantasy that they're consistent with each other. That you can exult in the lifestyle of one of these billionaires and think that it doesn't come with a kind of moral degradation, that you're not going to end up in the position of a Scrooge.
Yeah. That's the greatest fantasy of all, because as we've talked about extensively, what is it? Nary, I tell you, a rich man is more likely to enter the kingdom of heaven than a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, which I was then pointed out to me online on TikTok that actually the Greek word for camel sounds very similar to the Greek word for thick rope, and it's much more likely that it was mistranslated.
No, I think it's translated exactly right.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I'm a full believer. I'm a truther. I'm an eye of the.
You're an eye of the
needle.
No, eye
of the needle truther.
That's exactly who I need on this show. Thank God, because I was devastated.
No, there's a lot of this kind of thing. I mean, the higher criticism, biblical criticism, philological criticism. A lot of it is about like kind of parsing the secret meanings that lie under layers of the text. Some of that is there, and there are genuine mistranslations in the King James Version and things that have been sorted out through, careful comparison of manuscripts and all that. But there's also kind of a rich history of reading these texts, and that I take that tradition very, very seriously, and especially the early tradition of reading these texts. And the early church fathers were not like super pro private property.
Indeed. They were basically traveling mendicants.
I am intrigued by that. And I think that should weigh on our thinking about how to read the scriptures and how to read the message of the gospel.
I have to say that reading this, I had a reaction which I don't frequently have, where I was like, Christ is a little bit extreme.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you were the one who just quoted Matthew 10:34 to me.
I know.
Like you said that number and I was like, she's going to do the sword passage.
But you know what I mean? Extreme. But like, when do I feel that Christ is extreme? When I think about like my nails and how much I like nice nails, and I like my hair done a certain way, that like that's what I am concerned about, is like when the people have tasted the spoils of comfort and aesthetics, will they be so quick to give them up for the kingdom of heaven that they don't quite know about yet?
But this goes back to the beginning of our conversation. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, that we can play our role in responding to God's bringing that about in our everyday lives. It's not some future thing. It's not something we have to wait around for. Certainly not something we have to wait around for, confident in our own election. I mean, I think it's very interesting that Phil talks so much about Calvinism and the kind of Calvinist strain in fundamentalist evangelical Christianity, where there's a kind of smugness that comes with it. But
what was that word you just used? Smugness?
Smugness.
Oh, I was like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm being schooled on completely new words I've never heard.
Well, I hope I will come up with at least a couple.
I know, that'd be cool.
We can do more in the here and now, and some of that is just devoting more of our efforts to what the Sermon on the Mount tells us and what the...
So you're talking about half measures.
Not half measures. I'm talking about weakening our attachment to earthly things, which is eschatological and salvific and all that, but doing the corporal works of mercy, which which Phil talks about, going to the hospital and visiting the sick, going to prisons and being in community with the people in prisons, and going to the homeless people in our community and being with them.
But here's the thing, because I very much, for me, the framing that I can identify with a lot is this idea that like God has no hands but our hands, that we are God's hands, right, in the world, that we are called in the world to serve God's purposes. But my question is, like, can I be God's hands, like, with my beautiful nails?
Yeah, I think you can.
Well, I don't know. I feel like I would love to convince myself of that, but were I faced with Christ, I don't know what he would say about my manicure.
I think what is liberating about both the religious worldview that is described in this book and also the politics that it describes is that a lot of what we should try to do is to pursue a world where the massive, extraordinary riches that we already have are more justly shared. And to think about, I mean, we live in a world where Mark Zuckerberg can set $1 trillion on fire because he thinks about something called the metaverse, and he thinks that that's cool, right? And we live in a world where that happens, and where, by comparison, the extremely inexpensive malaria medication that we were providing to children in Africa is apparently too expensive for the U.S. government, where we have F-35s that were a program that costs trillions, and all of this weaponry, all of this technology, and there are basic things that the government could be involved in communities, helping people materially. And so I think that kind of call to solidarity, that's really what's at the center of the book, right? The idea is that Christianity has a call to universal solidarity, and the politics that reflects universal solidarity is the politics of the left. Yes. But it's not the politics of the scolding left.
Oh God, the woke left.
No, that's not in particular. It's the idea that you love your enemy
and your neighbor, because some of your neighbors are your enemies. And Phil talks about this quite movingly in the book, about the sense that you should probably have some enemies.
You should. You're going to have to have enemies, and the way of loving them is wanting them not to be despoiled by their riches, to have their characters morally degraded by the dragon's hoard that they sit atop.
Their souls perverted by
their worship of mammon.
Yeah.
Like, I want that from my neighbor. I want it very badly.
Do you want it for Elon? Would you like him to stop worshiping mammon?
I would like that very much, in part because he inspires so many others, as we were just talking about.
Totally. But you know what this makes me think
that's a call. That's Christian love right there.
That is Christian love.
Universal solidarity means I want Elon Musk to be part of the kingdom of heaven too.
Well, yeah, because he is another child of God.
And that's different from the kind of Marxist Leninist leftism that says we're going to have to do this. Throw them in the gulags. Yes, and we're going to have to do this through violence and revolutionary means for its own sake.
You want a revolution of love, man.
I do. I want specifically Ron Paul. Was that right? Ron Paul's campaign slogan, where it was revolution, but then the EVOL was in red, and like the letters are backwards, right?
Wow, that's so progressive of him.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm thinking up more defenses in my mind of my nails, and this is what I've come to. If one looks at the world, the natural world that is quickly passing from this earth, let's just think about a coral reef, right? And the fishes. Just if you've ever seen pictures of them or happened to be lucky enough to be to one, like the ecstatic, irreverent.
No, I think they're very reverent.
Okay, yes.
They're worshiping God in their colors.
I know, but God loves gorgeous aesthetics.
Correct.
Do you know what I mean? Like an exuberance, an abandon, an artistic decadence, right? If we look at the peacock or the angelfish or whatever, like clearly this is someone who cares about the beauty. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? We do not live in a what is not totalitarian, utilitarian world, right? Yeah. Like God revels in the splendor of beauty.
And that's why it's also good to like build cathedrals and write and perform sacred music.
And have nice nails.
And have nice nails.
And your hair, like we all get to be in the image of God. in our own small way.
And I think in a practical way, it would be a rare circumstance in which the money, the resources, the time that you spend on your nails come at the expense of other things that you really could be doing.
But somebody, do you know what I mean? Somebody was probably not paid enough in a factory somewhere. I mean, this is also what he's getting to, is that we are so, and what he sort of says is you cannot fight for equality just in your country, because we are also, it's basically just workers of the world, you know?
Yeah, it
do you know
is.
what I mean? That we must lift up everybody. We cannot lift up just sections.
And this is important because, even the most progressive socialist identifying members of the left in the United States tend not to be internationalists of that kind. And Bernie Sanders is a good example. He's someone who's very comfortable with industrial policy and things that promote American workers potentially at the expense of workers elsewhere. And we have to have this kind of global consciousness because the universality of the solidarity, like, it's so universal. Like, we're called on to have solidarity with the fish. I think there's actually an environmental ethics that comes with it too.
Of good stewardship.
And if there were Martians, we'd have, if there were other rational beings that were not human beings, we'd be called to be in solidarity with them too. So the nation state looks a whole lot like a contingent idol from this political perspective. And there's one way of looking at it which says, and so we should have a communist world government or something like that. And there's another perspective that says, actually, to have healthy human communities, you need to get the nation state out of everyone's business. That's really what's holding us back. But at any rate, if we live in a world with nation states, there ought to be justice and fairness pursued for people
everywhere. But isn't it going to take maybe the second coming of Christ to bring about this world that you speak of?
If you think about what the world looked like 2,000 years ago, when you had these powerful empires like the Roman Empire, which Judea was a small backwater province, and you think about how within a couple hundred years Christianity became the official religion of that empire, and then it was brought with the sword to many other places, and there's a dark history there. If you think about all of the political upheaval of the last 2 millennia, when we remember what happened 2025 or 2029, whoever knows, some number of years ago, when we believe that things changed.
You mean when Christ was born?
Yes, when Christ was born. That kind of unimaginable transformation has happened in what, from a certain perspective, is not a very great length of time. And who knows what the next millennium will bring, the next 2,000 years will bring. But it doesn't seem like we have to sit back and wait for it. It seems like there's a lot that we could be, again, doing now in the here and now. And even in my lifetime of about 40 years, things that seemed unimaginable are reality now, and who knows what will happen.
And as astrology would tell you, we are entering the age of Aquarius.
Age of Aquarius.
Exactly.
Yes.
Which is a time of great human transformation and innovation and the revolution of society for the equality
Things
and
do
benefit
seem
of
to be
all.
speeding up.
Baby, that's why you got to listen to those astrology bitches. You know what I mean? Because they're definitely not wrong.
Or just Isaiah.
Yeah,
we could just
totally.
read Isaiah.
You're like, let's keep it proper on Christmas Eve.
We've got the Bible right here.
Literally, it's right here next to my bed every night. But I only read the King James version because I'm in it for the poetry, as always. I'm in it for the aesthetics.
It is glorious.
It is glorious. I would say best text, in my opinion.
It's right up there.
Yeah.
It's right up there.
Yeah, well, I won't make you publicly say what you prefer over the Bible.
No, over the authorized version, about the translate. I'm talking about the translation.
Oh, okay. Well, do you have any parting Christmas thoughts?
I don't know. I think
Because God so loved the world.
because God so loved the world,
He gave us His only Son.
Yeah, I think there's not much more to
Say than that.
say than that.
Okay, well, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Class dismissed.